In a faraway galaxy, many young aliens sat in a classroom inside a shining silver dome. The sky above them was purple, and two suns shone gently through the glass roof. Their teacher, a tall creature with glowing blue eyes and thin arms, was telling stories from ancient times. Long ago, the teacher said, there was a strange race called humans. They came from a small blue planet. Some say they were smart, some say they were emotional, but most say they were just a fairy tale. The students laughed. Humans, one said, smiling. That's just an old myth, like the one about planets made of candy. Exactly, said another. Nobody believes Earth was real. The teacher smiled too. Yes, yes. Most scientists agree. There is no real proof, no records, just whispers in the dark corners of space history. But in the back of the room, one young alien didn't laugh. His name was Cal. He was curious and quiet. He loved reading old data logs and strange signals from forgotten systems. He had seen something before, a strange signal with human letters, floating in the galaxy's database. He never told anyone. Later that day, Cal walked to the galaxy's largest library, hidden under a crystal mountain. He asked the data keeper, "Do you have anything about Earth or humans?" The data keeper looked at him and blinked slowly. "Why do you ask about old legends?" Cal shrugged. "Just curious." The data keeper searched the records. Nothing official. But there is a strange entry. Very old. Corrupted. Found near the ruins of a broken satellite. It had a tag. Human origin. Would you like to see it? Cal nodded. The screen lit up. Fuzzy images appeared. Strange buildings. Blue skies. Green forests. And people with soft faces looking up at the stars. Then the screen went black. Cal leaned closer. Where was this found? The data keeper whispered, "Near a dead star. Coordinates lost." But some say the signal moved, as if it had its own path. Cal returned to his home, his mind spinning with questions. He opened his own files. Things he had saved but never shared. Old star maps. Faint signals. One of them pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. It had human writing. "We wait in silence." What did it mean? Elsewhere in the galaxy, on a large research ship called the Seeker, a group of alien explorers were traveling through deep space. Their captain, Vern, was known for exploring strange signals. He was brave and always chasing mysteries. One of his crew found something. "Captain, there's a weak signal. Very old. Strange language." Vern smiled. "Show me." They looked at the screen. The signal was short, but clear. It was the same as what Cal had seen. It said, "We wait in silence." Vern laughed. "Is this another human story? Let's follow it. Maybe we'll find old garbage floating in space." The crew laughed too. They followed the signal. It led them to a quiet place in the galaxy. No planets, no stars, just darkness. But in that darkness, a tiny light blinked. It was too small to be natural. Vern zoomed in. A strange object floated there. It looked old, metal, and silent. They pulled it aboard. It had no markings, except one strange word burned into its side. Earth. The crew stared at it. "Is this real?" someone asked. Vern smiled. "Only one way to know." He touched the surface, and suddenly, the object lit up. A soft voice filled the room. It was human. "If you can hear this," the voice said, "you have awakened the last memory of Earth." The ship went silent. Vern blinked. That was unexpected. Before they could speak again, the lights flickered. The ship's system showed new data flooding in, old human files, pictures, maps, messages in different languages. Something had been waiting. Something had been listening. Cal, far away, received a strange message on his old computer. It said, "They have found the memory. We are watching." He didn't know where it came from. He only knew one thing now. Maybe humans were not just a story. Maybe Earth was not truly gone. And maybe someone was still out there, waiting. The alien ship floated quietly near the strange object. The crew stood around it, unsure what to do next. The soft human voice had stopped, but the silence felt heavier now, almost as if something unseen was listening back. Captain Verne looked at his team. "Scan the object again," he said. One of the crew touched the controls. The scanner showed strange energy. It was not dangerous, but it was unusual. It didn't match any known technology in their database. "This technology is very old," the officer said, "but it's still active." The object began to glow slowly. A light moved across the room like a wave. It was not strong, but it made everyone pause. They watched as symbols appeared in the air, symbols no one had seen in a long time. "It's their language," whispered a scientist. "This is human writing." Then the voice returned, calm and clear. "You have opened the gate of memory. The watchers are awake." Everyone looked at each other. What gate? What watchers? The words made no sense, but the ship's computers suddenly began to act strange. Files were opening by themselves. Maps appeared, star charts long forgotten. A picture of Earth filled the screen, but it looked different. No clouds, no people, no cities, only silence. Captain Verne leaned closer. "Run a deep scan. I want to know if this image is real." The crew worked quickly. After a few minutes, the result came back. The planet was real, but it was hidden behind a star that no ship ever visited. That area was marked as unstable, with no interest for travelers. A quiet zone. The crew now stared at the map in silence. One of them said, "Why would Earth hide behind a star? And why send a message now?" Captain Verne stood straight. "We will go there." Some of the crew looked worried. "Captain, what if it's a trap?" He nodded. "That is possible. But if the humans were just a story, then who sent this message? And why are we receiving it now?" No one could answer. The ship changed direction and began to move. The stars outside stretched like lines as they entered the jump stream. The path to the quiet zone had never been taken before. No ships returned with stories. It was just a blank space in galactic maps. But now, something was pulling them in. Back in another part of the galaxy, Cale was still staring at his screen. The message was still there. "They have found the memory." He didn't know who they were, but he felt sure someone was watching. He opened his personal archive. He found old recordings, strange radio signals, forgotten symbols. One of them matched the voice from the alien ship. It was a welcome message from Earth, recorded long ago. But there was something strange about it. The message ended with one final line. "If you hear this, you are not alone." Cale leaned back. The stories were not just stories anymore. Something had survived. Maybe not humans, but something that remembered them. Something that kept their names safe. Meanwhile, Captain Verne's ship exited the jump. The area looked dark, with no light from stars or planets. Only one object floated ahead. A large sphere, metallic and silent. The crew stared at it. It was not natural. It had no windows, no doors, and no engines. It just floated there. A signal came from the sphere. It was short, but clear. "Welcome back." "Back," one of the crew whispered. "What does that mean?" Suddenly, lights moved across the sphere's surface. Shapes appeared. Old flags, pictures of people, even animals. They faded quickly, replaced by one single image, a human face. It was not moving, just watching. The ship's systems began to slow down. Not broken, just paused. The air felt still, like the moment before something important happens. No alarms, no danger, just silence and waiting. Captain Verne stepped forward and spoke toward the screen. "Who are you?" There was no answer. He tried again. "We are peaceful explorers. We received your signal. We want to understand. Still, silence. Then, for just a moment, the human face blinked. It didn't speak, but that blink was enough to make every crew member feel something strange. Not fear, not threat, something deeper. Recognition. They were being watched not by machines, not by ghosts, but by something that remembered. Something that had been waiting. Not asleep. Not lost. Just silent. The ship floated quietly. No one spoke. No one moved. Something had changed. Far away, Cale received a second message. This one was short. They are closer now. And then, once again, silence. The ship floated near the silent sphere. No engines moved. No lights blinked. The galaxy outside seemed far away now, like a forgotten dream. Inside the control room, every screen showed the same thing. The face of a human. Still. Calm. Watching. Captain Verne stood without speaking. The others waited, not knowing what to do next. The silence was not empty. It felt full, like the pause before something speaks for the first time in 1,000 years. Then the human face faded, and a new image appeared. A soft blue light formed into a shape. It looked like a building, tall, round, and made of glass. Slowly, the view zoomed out. Now, oceans came into view. Clouds, mountains, trees, cities without people. It was Earth. But not as a planet in space. It was a memory. A recording, maybe. The screen showed life moving across time. Children laughing, people walking, machines flying. Then, without warning, everything stopped. The world went still. The oceans froze. The sky turned gray. The cities became quiet. The picture held there for a long time. One of the crew whispered, "Did they leave?" Captain Verne said nothing. He watched carefully. Then the screen changed again. It now showed stars. Lots of them. Slowly being mapped. A line moved through them, stopping at certain points. It was as if someone, or something, was marking safe places. Maybe old stations, maybe hidden shelters. The ship's computer translated the message. Path of return. Follow only when ready. A quiet beeping sound started, like a countdown, but without numbers. It was soft, like a heartbeat. Everyone in the room could hear it. It wasn't scary, just patient. Cale, still in his room far away, stared at the same signal. His old system had picked it up again. This time, it showed symbols, old human writing mixed with new patterns. One message kept repeating. Memory has weight. You must carry it to understand. He didn't know what it meant, but he felt something inside. A quiet need to go, to follow, to see what waited at the end of the signal. Back on the ship, the crew finally spoke again. "Captain," one said, "should we leave or stay?" Verne didn't answer right away. He looked at the ship's clock. It had stopped counting time. The only thing that moved was the signal. Tick, 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 slow and calm. "No," he said softly. "We don't leave. Not yet. Something is here. Not a trap. Not a warning. It feels like an invitation." The ship's floor vibrated gently, not shaking, just a hum, like something under their feet was waking up. Outside, the sphere began to open. It didn't split apart or break. It simply changed. A round hole appeared, like a door. Behind it was not metal or light, but stars. Endless stars. "That's not possible," said the pilot. "It's showing space. Inside the sphere." The captain nodded. "It's not a ship. It's a gate." They watched as the view deepened. Inside the sphere, stars moved slowly, but they didn't match any known galaxy. The readings showed nothing. No temperature, no distance, no danger. Just emptiness, full of something unknown. Then a new message appeared. "This is where memory lives. Come only with truth." Cale stood in front of his small ship, preparing for a journey. He had no plan, no map, only the message. His world felt too small now. He had seen too much. Something inside him knew. The old stories were never just stories. He looked at the stars one last time, then stepped inside. Back on Captain Vern's ship, the crew slowly moved closer to the sphere. Their ship floated gently toward the open gate. No one forced them. No systems pushed them forward. It was a choice. And they made it. As the ship passed through the gate, the lights dimmed. Sounds faded. Then, slowly, something new came into view. A sky. A different sky, full of moving shapes, soft lights, and buildings made of glowing lines. They were no longer in space. They were inside something else. The ship touched down on a quiet field. The ground felt soft under the landing gear. There were no people, no voices, but the feeling of being watched remained. A message blinked again. To understand, you must remember what we chose to forget. Captain Vern stepped outside, breathing in the still air. It smelled like nothing he had known before, but it felt old, like the first breath after a long sleep. He turned back to the ship. His crew followed. The world around them waited, patient and quiet. Not threatening, not empty, just waiting. The field stretched out before Captain Vern and his crew, bathed in an eerie, soft light. The air was still, yet full of an energy they couldn't explain. It didn't feel like a place. It didn't feel like a world. It felt like a memory, a place that only existed in the echoes of time. The crew stood still, their eyes scanning the horizon. They saw no life, no movement, just a vast landscape dotted with faint shapes in the distance. There were structures, but they weren't like anything they had seen before. There were no sharp lines, no obvious forms. Instead, the buildings seemed to flow, like the light itself had shaped them. "This doesn't look like a normal world," one of the crew members whispered, stepping forward cautiously. Captain Vern nodded. "No, it doesn't. But it's real. We're not in the stars anymore." He turned to look at the sky, which seemed too vast to be contained by anything. It was as though the sky reached out beyond the edges of their senses, beyond what they knew. The stars weren't fixed. They moved, like they were alive, shifting and forming new patterns, as if they were trying to communicate. A soft hum filled the air. It wasn't coming from their ship, but from somewhere deep within the landscape. It was subtle, a vibration that seemed to come from the earth itself, but it was too uniform to be natural. "Do you hear that?" Vern asked, his voice quiet, almost reverent. "Yes," replied another crew member. "It's like a pulse." The crew looked around but saw nothing that would explain the sound. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't a storm. It was like the land itself was alive, breathing in and out. Then, from the distance, something moved. At first, it was just a ripple, a change in the light. But soon, it became clearer. Shapes, figures, humanoid in form, appeared. They weren't walking. They didn't seem to move in any usual way. Instead, they flowed toward the group, like shadows made of light. There were no faces, no details, just vague outlines of beings, glowing softly. One of the crew took a step back, eyes wide. Are those people?" Captain Vern didn't answer. He simply watched as the figures approached. They didn't speak, but their presence felt undeniable. The hum in the air grew louder, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was familiar, like the sound of something waiting to be understood. The figures stopped a few feet away, not moving any closer. They simply watched. Silent. Still. But there was something about their gaze, something about the way they hovered just out of reach, that made it impossible to look away. Captain Vern took a deep breath and spoke, though his voice felt distant in the quiet air. "We come in peace. We want to understand." The figures didn't respond with words. Instead, a soft wave of light washed over the crew. It wasn't painful. It wasn't even bright. It was like a wave of warmth, something gentle and inviting. Then something new appeared, a structure rising from the ground. It was not built. It wasn't made of material at all. It was like the space itself had formed it. The structure was tall and seemed to reach up to touch the moving stars above. The walls were transparent, but inside, the crew couldn't make out any details. It felt like an invitation. A voice came then, not spoken, but felt. It wasn't from the figures. It came from everywhere, all around them. It was calm, patient, like a memory. To understand, you must let go of what you know. We were once like you, but we chose to remember. Vern looked around at his crew. He could see the uncertainty in their eyes. The message was strange, impossible to understand completely. But somehow it made sense. This place was not a trap. This place was a door, a bridge between memories, between what was and what could still be. One of the crew members, unable to stay silent, spoke up. "What do you mean by remember? What happened to you?" The voice responded, not with words, but with images, memories, pieces of a story. First, there was the image of Earth, a green and blue planet, full of life. The images flickered quickly, showing people working together, building, exploring. Then, everything slowed. The skies turned dark. The oceans churned. Cities crumbled. But it wasn't destruction. It was a change. The images faded, and the figures around them began to glow brighter. They became less like shapes and more like symbols of energy. They moved closer, and this time, they did not stop. They surrounded the crew, filling the air with a soft light. The voice returned, still calm, still patient. "We were not lost. We chose to leave, to wait. We chose to remember what others forgot. The memory is not just what is lost. It is what is kept. Earth was never gone. It was just hidden, waiting for those who could understand." The crew stood frozen. The weight of the message pressed down on them. They had thought Earth was lost, destroyed, forgotten. But this place, the beings they stood among, had known. They had remembered. Vern felt a deep connection, something he could not explain. It was not fear, not awe, just a knowing. They had found something that had been hidden for eons. Earth had not disappeared. It had simply waited. One of the crew members, a young officer, stepped forward. "How do we learn what you know? How do we remember?" The figures responded again, not with images, but with sensations, emotions, feelings that washed over the group. Peace, patience, understanding. "You must see the path. It is not a path of space. It is a path of time. You must go beyond the stars to find the truth. It is not lost. It is waiting within you." Captain Vern closed his eyes. The message was clear now. Earth was not gone. It was hidden, waiting, remembering. The truth was not out there, among the stars. It was inside, within the memories of those who could understand. The journey had only just begun. The crew stood in silence as the figures slowly withdrew, their glowing forms fading back into the distance. The strange hum in the air seemed to soften, like a song played at the edge of hearing. Captain Vern looked around, sensing the stillness that had settled over them all. It was as if the land itself had breathed a deep, quiet sigh. He turned to face his crew, who were all watching the figures retreat into the horizon. They had all been a part of something that could never be fully explained. No matter how much they tried, the feeling of being in this place, this memory, couldn't be captured in words. "We have to find out more," Vern said softly. "This is bigger than we imagined." One of the crew members nodded, her voice trembling slightly. "But how? We've seen things that don't belong to us. How do we even begin to understand what they want?" The captain thought for a moment. He could feel the weight of her question pressing on him. They had no answers. But the words they had received, the images they had seen, felt like a key to something long forgotten. The message was clear. To remember was to understand. But how did they unlock the door to this forgotten knowledge? The crew gathered around, and Vern motioned for them to follow. They began walking toward the mysterious structure that had risen from the ground. The closer they got, the more they realized that the structure wasn't built in the way they understood buildings. It wasn't made from metal or stone, nor did it have a surface they could touch. It was as if the very fabric of space had woven itself into this shape, a structure of light, intangible but real. As they stood before it, the ground beneath them shifted slightly, as though the earth itself was breathing again. The structure seemed to pulse with a gentle rhythm, as though it was alive, waiting, inviting. Suddenly, a soft light flickered within the structure, and a door formed, not from any material, but from the surrounding air itself. It was an opening, like a window into something beyond, but at the same time, it felt like a reflection of something deep inside them. "We need to go inside," Vern said. His voice was steady, but there was an edge of urgency in it. They had no idea what awaited them, but the message had been clear. This was their next step. The crew hesitated, exchanging nervous glances. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was more the weight of knowing that the answers they sought might not be as simple as they hoped. The world they had known, the reality they had lived in, had just been turned upside down. But the door, or the opening, called to them. It was like a familiar voice beckoning them forward. Vern stepped through first, his boots making no sound as they touched the soft, glowing surface of the interior. The others followed, stepping into the doorway one by one. As they crossed the threshold, the air inside seemed to change, becoming cooler, thicker, like a deep breath that filled their lungs. Inside, the space was vast, larger than they expected. The walls, if they could even be called that, seemed to curve and stretch infinitely. They could see no edges, no clear boundaries. It was as though they had stepped into the very heart of the universe itself. And yet there was something comforting about it. The air was filled with a low hum, a melody that wrapped around them like a gentle wind, soothing their minds. It wasn't alien. It wasn't unfamiliar. It felt like something they had always known, something buried deep within their memories. At the center of the room, a soft glow illuminated a large platform. It was circular and appeared to be made of the same glowing substance that made up the walls. The crew stood in awe, not daring to move. The hum around them grew louder, as if encouraging them to step forward. Vern nodded toward the platform, silently signaling for them to approach. As they moved closer, the light on the platform shifted, and a new message appeared, not spoken, but etched into the air itself, like a vision formed from the very light around them. To remember, you must trust. What you seek is not found in the stars. It is within. The truth is not lost, but hidden. Search not in the outer world, but in your hearts. The crew was silent, absorbing the words. Vern felt a strange sense of recognition. The message seemed simple, yet profound. They had been searching the stars, hoping to find answers beyond their reach. But now it seemed that the answers had always been close, just out of their grasp, hidden within themselves. A sudden realization hit him. This is not just about Earth, Vern murmured. It's about all of us, about what we've forgotten. One of the crew members, standing beside him, looked at him with confusion. "What do you mean, Captain?" "I mean," Vern began slowly, "that perhaps the reason we've been searching for so long is because we've forgotten what's truly important. We've looked outward, to the stars, but we've never really looked inward. To understand what happened to Earth, we need to understand what we've lost in ourselves." The words hung in the air, as if the very space around them was waiting for them to accept this truth. It wasn't just about a lost world. It was about remembering who they were, who they had been before they had turned their backs on the past. The platform in front of them began to pulse softly again, and the message shifted. This time, the words were clearer, more urgent. "Look within, and the path will reveal itself. The truth is always closer than you think." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but there was a shift in the air, a feeling that the time to understand had come. They had all been searching for something outside of themselves, But now they knew that the key to the past, the key to understanding what happened to Earth, lay within. Vern stepped forward, placing his hand on the glowing platform. He felt a warmth radiate from it, not like heat, but like understanding. The air around him shimmered, and for a moment, he saw a glimpse of the past, a vision of Earth, alive with people, with energy, with hope. But then, the vision faded and the message returned. The journey begins within. To understand Earth's fate, you must first understand your own. The lights surrounding the crew grew even brighter, enveloping them in a warm, almost comforting glow. It was as if the air itself was alive, pressing against their skin in a gentle embrace. Captain Vern stood before the platform, his hand still resting on the surface. The hum in the air grew more intense, vibrating through the soles of his boots, until it was no longer just a sound, it was a feeling. A sensation that coursed through his body, filling every part of him, making him feel connected to something far larger than himself. As the light around them began to pulse, the image of Earth flickered in the air again. This time, it was clearer. The planet they had once known, vibrant and full of life, appeared before them. But there was something different about this vision. The skies were not filled with the usual blue. Instead, there were streaks of gold and silver, colors that they had never seen before. The oceans were no longer the deep blue they remembered. Instead, they shimmered with a strange, otherworldly glow, reflecting the stars in a way that made them seem like they were alive. The crew stood in awe, watching as the image of Earth shifted, revealing something more. They saw the ancient cities of Earth, places they had only heard of in legends. There were great structures that touched the sky, filled with energy and life. But as the vision unfolded, they saw something else. The people of Earth, humanity, were not alone. Around them, there were other beings. These beings were different from the figures they had encountered before. They were not made of light, but of solid matter. Their forms were more tangible, and yet there was something about them that felt ancient, timeless. Captain Vern felt a pull, a deep urge to understand what he was seeing. The vision showed the humans living in harmony with these beings, working together to create something greater than themselves. There was no conflict, no war. There was only peace, knowledge, and cooperation. The Earth they had known wasn't just a world. It was a center of wisdom, a hub of connections that stretched across the galaxy. But then, as the image shifted, the peace shattered, the harmony faded. The beings began to withdraw, pulling back into the shadows. The humans were left behind, isolated. Their once thriving civilization began to crumble, and the Earth they had known started to change. Vern took a deep breath, trying to understand what he was seeing. The vision before him was clear, yet confusing. What had happened? Why had these beings left? Where had they gone? "We were never alone," Vern whispered to himself, his voice trembling slightly. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but there was still something elusive about the story they were being shown. The vision flickered, and once again they saw the Earth. This time, it was dark, silent. A world that had forgotten its past, its connections to the greater universe. A world that had once been a beacon of knowledge, now shrouded in mystery and silence. The platform before them began to hum more loudly, almost as if it was trying to communicate. The glowing light intensified, and once again, the message appeared before them, not in words, but in images. The first image was that of a single figure, standing alone on the edge of the world. The figure looked out over the horizon, as if waiting for something. It was a human, but not just any human. This one was different. This one had a purpose that stretched beyond the world they knew, beyond the stars. The next image was a flash of bright light, a burst of energy that swept across the surface of the Earth. The world trembled, and the skies darkened. The light faded, leaving behind only a memory of something greater. The message became clearer. The time of waiting is over. The past cannot remain hidden. The truth will come to light, and the cycle will begin again. The crew stared at the image, each of them processing what they had just witnessed. There was a growing sense of urgency, a feeling that something was about to happen. The time of waiting was over. The cycle was beginning again. But what did that mean for them? What did that mean for Earth? Captain Verne turned to his crew, his face pale but determined. We have to move forward. We can't stay here. We have the answers we need, but there's more. The cycle is starting again, and we're part of it. We need to find out where this path leads. One of the crew members, still shaken by the vision, spoke up. But what if we're not ready? What if we don't understand the truth we're being shown? What if we're wrong? Verne shook his head. We can't afford to be wrong. Everything we've seen, everything we've learned, it's all connected. We're being guided. The past is not lost, and it's not hidden anymore. The answers are right here, right in front of us. We have to move forward, no matter how uncertain it feels. As the crew stood in a circle around the platform, a soft light began to rise from the ground. It was subtle at first, like a fog lifting, but then it grew stronger. The air around them started to hum once more, the vibrations growing in intensity. The ground beneath them seemed to shift, and the platform began to glow even brighter. The light expanded, and for a moment, it seemed as if the whole world was being bathed in this strange, otherworldly glow. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the light faded, the hum stopped, and the air became still once more. Verne looked around at his crew. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. The answers they had been seeking were within their reach. They had seen the truth. They had glimpsed the past, and the truth was far more complex and mysterious than they had ever imagined. But they were ready to face whatever came next. The crew stood together in the stillness that followed, their minds racing as they processed the revelations that had been laid before them. The light had faded, but the sense of purpose, the feeling that something was on the verge of happening, lingered in the air like the echo of a distant song. Captain Verne felt it deeply. Something was coming. He couldn't explain it, but he knew it was true. The answers were within reach, and they were no longer just searching for the past. They were stepping into the future. We've seen the path, Verne said, his voice steady, but filled with the weight of understanding. Now, we have to walk it. The crew exchanged glances, some uncertain, others filled with a sense of resolve. They had been thrown into the unknown, forced to confront truths that had been hidden for centuries. But now, they had to face what came next. They had seen Earth's past, its connection to the greater universe, and the knowledge that was buried within it. They had seen their own place in the story, but the path forward was still unclear. Where do we go from here? One of the crew members asked, her voice tinged with hesitation. We have the knowledge, but it's not enough. We don't know what to do with it. The cycle is beginning again, but we don't understand what that means for us. Verne took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the horizon. The air was thick with possibility, charged with energy. We go back to Earth, he said quietly. We go back, and we start again. We can't keep running from what's happened. The truth is there, waiting for us. The crew fell silent, each person processing the enormity of Verne's words. They had traveled so far, seen so much, and yet they were still searching for answers. Earth was more than just a planet. It was a symbol of humanity's past, a reflection of their journey through time. The message had been clear. To understand the future, they had to embrace the past. The sky above them shifted, the stars growing brighter, almost as if in response to Verne's words. The air around them hummed with a quiet energy, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble with the weight of a promise. The path was opening, but it was not a road that could be easily walked. It was a journey that would require courage, understanding, and the willingness to face the unknown. We've been given a gift, Verne continued, his voice low and reflective. But with it comes a responsibility. We can't ignore what we've learned. We can't let the past slip away again." As he spoke, a feeling of clarity washed over him. It was as if the world had come into focus, like a painting that had once been blurred now becoming sharp and vivid. The answers were not out there, in distant stars or alien encounters. They were here, on Earth, buried in the hearts of the people who had once lived there. The crew nodded in agreement, a sense of unity forming among them. They had been given a second chance, not just to understand the past, but to reshape the future. The journey they had embarked on was more than just a quest for knowledge. It was a chance to reclaim something lost, to bring the forgotten truth back into the light. "We can do this," one of the crew members said, her voice filled with a newfound confidence. "We can return to Earth, learn from what's been left behind, and rebuild." Vern smiled, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "We will, but we must remember, we are not just exploring space anymore. We are exploring ourselves. We've seen the truth. We've seen what lies beyond the stars. But now we must look within, find the strength to face what is to come, and trust that the answers we seek are not hidden from us, but waiting for us to discover them." The crew stood in silence, the weight of their mission settling over them. They had been chosen for this journey, not just because of their skill, but because they had the strength to confront what others could not. They had the courage to face the unknown, to unravel the mysteries that had eluded humanity for so long. As they turned to leave the platform, the light began to fade once more, but it was different this time. It wasn't a fading of hope, but a softening, as if the knowledge they had gained had been imprinted upon their very souls. The path forward was not just about uncovering the past, it was about embracing the future, whatever it held. The stars above seemed to shimmer with a new kind of brilliance, and the crew made their way back to their ship, their hearts filled with a sense of purpose they had never known before. They were not just travelers of the stars. They were the keepers of a forgotten history, the ones who would bring the truth back to Earth. Vern stepped onto the ship's deck, the crew following behind him. They were ready to return home, ready to face the future, and ready to bring the truth to the world that had once forgotten it. Earth's story was not over. It was just beginning. The engines hummed to life as the ship lifted off the ground, rising into the night sky. As the crew looked out the windows, they saw the vast expanse of space spread out before them, endless and mysterious. But now, they understood. The universe was not a place to fear. It was a place to explore, to discover, and to learn. And it was waiting for them, ready to reveal its secrets. Together, they were not just explorers. They were the ones who would reshape the future, using the wisdom of the past to guide them forward. And as the ship soared into the unknown, they knew one thing for certain. Earth's vengeance had already begun. The cycle had started again, and humanity was no longer forgotten. They were ready to take their place among the stars.